All right, Weston.
Welcome, everyone, to MS Office Hours. It is Thursday, January 29th. Let me please introduce our hosts.
I am Heather Cox, and so thankful Weston's back to remember the date for us because that takes a lot of effort for me.
Hey, everybody. I'm Dwayne, Cloud Solution Architect, here with Heather to see some awesome stuff from Charles. So thank you, Charles, for hanging out with us. Teach us something.
Yes, Charles, we're very excited to have you, and I also highly appreciate all the children's artwork and art projects behind you. That is awesome. That is a dad. That is such a dad thing, and I love it. So Charles is here to talk about Foundry, and the show is yours. We are going to turn our cameras and mics off.
All right, thanks everyone. I guess the thing I'll say about my artwork, you could probably tell there's a couple of pieces missing. So I'm actually not that great of a dad because I haven't taken the time to re-hang up any of the artwork that's fallen down yet. So apologies to my kids for calling that out. Anyways, thanks for having me, everybody. This is actually, I think, my second time here. I think the first time was back in maybe the fall of 2024 to speak about AI, of course. That's what everybody talks about these days. And that's what I'm here to talk about today, too. Just by way of context, if you can't tell, I'm based out of Austin. I saw Marge earlier. I work with Marge, have worked with Marge for quite a long time. I am a Longhorn, proud Longhorn, but been at Microsoft for almost 8 years now. And for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been heads down, just focused on generative AI coast to coast. So I've been helping all of our strategic R1s and academic medical centers do really cool and novel things with generative AI that was impossible just a few years ago. So it's been a roller coaster. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm glad to be back here to share some things with the group here. So I was reached out to discuss, I think maybe a topic that comes up a lot in my line of work, because this is all I talk about, is what tool to use when for agentic building, right? We have this concept of agents now. They used to be called chatbots. Now they're a little bit more than chatbots. And at Microsoft, we have different tools for different personas, right? And I think before we get started as to which tool to use when, I think it makes sense to give you a little bit of context as to what an agent is and maybe when it becomes an agent. So I like this little Electron cloud model because it kind of breaks it down pretty easily. So to build an agent, you need about 6 things, right? So first of all, you need a model, right? Obviously, hopefully everybody understands that. Then you need to customize that model. Typically, that's done through something we call a system prompt, which you can, it's analogous to instructions for the model on what to do and how to behave and what not to do and that kind of stuff. It gives it a personality sometimes, and it gives it instructions on what its intent is and why it exists. And the next step, number 3, is associating that agent with knowledge and tools. And I think in between 3 and 4, it starts to become an agent. I think just given a model, a system prompt, I think you're still kind of just using a chatbot or a model for one task. Once you start associating a model with a system prompt with knowledge and tools, you start to get into more advanced things, and that's kind of when it becomes an agent. And then you start wrapping orchestration around it, number 4, and you're able to execute it and be able to interface with other agents and be able to call different knowledge sources through MCP and other things. And then you start really get into the more powerful side of agentic orchestration and agentic architecture. And finally, I think probably more important than anything else are the last 2, number 5 and 6, security, trust and governance, and observability. And all those 6 electrons is what is needed at the most basic level to create an agent these days. And for better or worse, we have different tools that do the same thing, right? And that's why I'm here to discuss this. So from my perspective, I live in Azure. I've been doing nothing but Azure for the entire time I've been at Microsoft and even before. But we have this whole other ecosystem that I think we call, what is it, guys? AI apps or something like that these days. It used to be called Modern Work. We changed the name for marketing reasons around the fiscal year. Out of there, you guys have been talking about Copilot for the last half hour. That's obviously where Copilot Studio lives, is on the more software as a service side, whereas Azure is a platform as a service side. And if I were to just leave you guys with one thing, it would be this slide, because this is your guide to decide what tool to use where, right? There's low code on the left, there's pro code on the right, which, by the way, is becoming less of a learning curve than it used to be because of AI, through things like GitHub Copilot and Claude Code and all that other stuff that just really accelerates and brings the hurdles down for pro code. But this is what it comes down to. And there's the stuff in the middle that, regardless of whether you're using low code or pro code, all the stuff in the middle is still relevant to each. But the benefits of low code, obviously, a lower learning curve, which means necessarily that it's probably faster to develop something. It's a really good platform to get quick wins and maybe prove things out. And it also usually comes with things like templates and really just starter material to accelerate your development. And it's usually super managed, right? So our low code platform, obviously Copilot Studio. Pro code on the right hand side would be what we call now Microsoft Foundry. It used to be called Microsoft Azure AI Foundry. And then before that, it was called AI Studio. So it's gone through some identity changes over the years. I think hopefully we finally settled down Microsoft Foundry. But the right-hand side, again, is where I spend most of my time. And it's a spectrum of in between, right? So if you were to break it down, Copilot Studio on the far right-hand side in this case is software as a service. And on the far left-hand side, in this case, we have infrastructure as a service. So that's hardcore servers and GPUs and HPC and all kinds of fun stuff, which, by the way, you can still do in Azure, but it's a lot more involved than either Copilot Studio or Microsoft Foundry. And you can kind of see where the spectrum points to on those arrows on the top and bottom. Towards the right, integration's a lot easier. Overall, it's a lot easier towards the right, but integration into various things, because Copilot Studio is part of our Power Platform environment or ecosystem. It has all the native connectivity through Power Automate and all the Power App stuff that's been there and it's been mature for a while. And speed to development is a lot faster because there's fewer things for you to control, fewer knobs, fewer levers to pull, that kind of stuff. And on the left-hand side, you kind of see what pushes you towards the IaaS or PaaS pieces of the spectrum. And that's if you want control, you want more visibility and more customization. And there's pros and cons to either, right? There's no right solution. Speed of development is faster, obviously, but and better for getting a value quicker. But you give up things, you give up control, you give up that kind of stuff. And there's trade-offs from when you go from one end of the spectrum to the other. To give you an idea of just what the interfaces are like, IaaS, it's hardcore code. That's all it is, right? You're strapping up servers. You're using things like NVIDIA's CUDA and all their frameworks to do AI stuff and train large language models or machine learning models. Microsoft Foundry, platform as a service, a lot of things are still managed for you, but still you're more or less living in code. There's GUIs to it, but if you want to take complete control of the platform and really innovate, then you want to kind of live in an IDE and call everything through code or different libraries or CLI. And on the right-hand side, Copilot Studio almost entirely done with the GUI, right? So that's kind of like pro code, low code, right? IaaS, software as a service. And this kind of just summarizes everything I kind of already went. If you want full control, if you want to be unbound by any opinion from Microsoft or any other provider, IaaS on the left-hand side is where you want to be. But because of that, you take on the overhead of these servers, patching, break fix kind of stuff, all the security involved with IaaS, all that stuff is on you. In the middle, platform as a service, we have this concept of a shared responsibility matrix within Microsoft. Things start shifting more away from you and towards us on Microsoft Foundry. And we start taking more control of things like security for the servers, because there are no servers, right? It's platform as a service. It's all managed for you, but you still have the ability to write the code and kind of tune the systems to do what you want. And then finally, on the far right-hand side, again, in this case, Copilot Studio, everything's managed for you. Everything is super opinionated in Microsoft's opinion and bias on how things should be done, which is not a bad thing because it definitely accelerates the development of agents, but then you're constrained to what those opinions are. And they could be good opinions, they could be bad opinions, depending on what your opinion is, right? So hopefully these last few slides kind of summarize the spectrum and the options you have. And now I'm going to go through and check the chat real quick to make sure there aren't any questions. and dive into both. I'm going to leave IaaS off the table for now because that's a whole other conversation. So we're not going to be talking about GPUs or spinning up HPC clusters or anything like that. We're going to focus just on Copilot Studio and Microsoft Foundry. All right. So in terms of Copilot Studio, even within Copilot Studio, there's different experiences for different people, or different, not even different people, but different modalities on how much control you want to have within the SaaS platform. So on the far left-hand side, again, another spectrum. If you want very hands-off experience, very light experience, there's the ability to just type what you want the agent to do, have it go make an agent for you, and assume hopefully that the agent created was the agent that you wanted, and the intent and how it connects to things are kind of bootstrapped for you and take advantage of you. And that's as fast as it could be, right? It could be just one paragraph from you to create an agent. And that's amazing that we're at a point now in early 2026 where that's all it takes to create like a really powerful AI agent. Then there in the middle here is what we call the full experience, where you can still do that. You can still provide a description of what you want your agent to be, but then you have the ability to introduce things like the integrations I mentioned earlier with Power Automate and other stuff and different knowledge sources you can consume from, like SharePoint and Fabric and other Microsoft or non-Microsoft knowledge sources to create these agents. But then finally, on the far right-hand side, you have this advanced ability to add extensions to Copilot Studio. And one thing I want to mention or call out, just so it's clear to everybody, you do have the ability, and if this marker is seen by everybody, you do have the ability to extend into Microsoft Foundry through Copilot Studio. So even if you were to choose the low-code, no-code citizen developer experience to accelerate agentic development, you can still plug into the more pro-code real developer, I guess, versus citizen developer tools within Azure and Azure AI and Microsoft Foundry to do more advanced things within Copilot Studio. So you kind of get the best of both worlds if you wanted to. Don't have to, but you kind of get the best of both worlds. So that's something that I think is true throughout the Microsoft ecosystem. We always kind of try to make sure that whatever we do integrates well with everything else we do. At least we strive to. That's not always true, but we strive to make that true so that your experiences can be pretty seamless and you don't have to go here for one thing and there for another thing, right? We try to give you every piece of the puzzle A to Z, from the IDE to the platforms, right? To do whatever it is you want to do. And this just summarizes kind of what I've been talking about as far as Copilot Studio. It's one ecosystem, one opinionated ecosystem, which accelerates agentic development and is totally managed for you. So there's no infrastructure at all for you to manage unless you really want to, and you do have the ability to, which really extends the capabilities of the platform. But since it's totally managed, since it's opinionated, since there's no levers for you to pull, you kind of have to build the agent unless you take advantage of those extensions I mentioned earlier. You have to build the agent in the ways Microsoft says the Copilot Studio platform should be building agents, right? There's sometimes like arbitrary, or I guess, I don't know, opinionated limitations on how many URLs you can call or something like that, right? That's just things that exist, kind of landmines to look out for as you're exploring Copilot Studio. Super powerful platform, but again, since it's totally managed for you, you kind of have to do it the way we say you should have to build agents, which is not right or wrong. It's just that's the nature of providing a software as a service ecosystem, because we have to manage everything for you. So there's gives and takes there. But at the end of the day, if you want to build an agent, you want to do it quick. Copilot Studio for sure is a really powerful platform to explore, to be able to at a minimum prove your concept out, right? And if it's good, if it proves the value, maybe continue keeping it alive in Copilot Studio, or you can extend it into Microsoft Foundry, or build it from scratch in Microsoft Foundry and truly make it enterprise grade for like the whole institution to take advantage of. I'm going to pivot. This is where I'm mostly familiar with. Again, I live in Azure, so I live and breathe Microsoft Foundry. That's all I do these days, is talk about Microsoft Foundry and all of our AI stuff. What is it? So it's a few different things. I mentioned the name changes earlier, right? So it's evolved obviously through time. Before Microsoft Foundry, we had different studios for different AI things, right? We had a vision studio, a speech studio, a text studio, decision making studio for different AI domains. And the first thing we did when this was called Azure AI Studio was collapse all that down into one pane of glass, and we added Azure OpenAI, which also had its own studio as part of Azure AI Studio. Since then, it's grown a lot. It's matured a lot. It's changed names a few times. And a couple of the foundational pieces, I'm not going to cover all of it just due to the nature of today's call. The foundational pieces I'd like to call out are sort of these icons here at the top. The first thing you do within Microsoft Foundry is pick your model, and we have a catalog of over, I guess, approaching 12,000 models now. So it's vast. It's not just OpenAI models. It now includes things like Claude. It includes things like Mistral and DeepSeek and Meta. So all of those are there. Thousands of models for Hugging Face, models from Microsoft Research. There's also industry-specific models from like healthcare and material sciences and things like that. So there's a vast ecosystem of models for you to choose from in this model catalog. And we also have, by the way, I don't know if this is the right stakeholders on the call or not, but we also have the ability for your schools to add your own models to this model catalog. So schools like Stanford and some others across the country who I've worked with have models in this model catalog, which is a way for you to monetize the AI innovation coming out of your schools. So within the model catalog, you pick your model, then you build your agent. And agent service here is the service that I'll talk about here in a few minutes to build those agents. Foundry IQ is a relatively new service that came out of Ignite, I think, in November of this past year, which is, if you guys know what RAG is, or retrieval augmented generation, that's RAG as a service. So it uses a few different services within our AI infrastructure. One of them is AI search and some other services to do RAG totally managed for you, right? So you can still do it yourself. You still bolt the pieces together yourself. But if you wanted to just take RAG from 0 to 100 right away, Foundry IQ is the way to do that. And the other two tools is just integration into different tools. I mentioned Power Automate for Copilot Studio. In Azure, we have something called Logic Apps, which is like the big brother of Power Automate. You could definitely integrate natively within Logic Apps and within Microsoft Foundry to make all those integrations into APIs that have existed for forever. Also call things natively through MCP, whether you use Copilot Studio or Microsoft Foundry. MCP is the Model Context Protocol, to interface with all sorts of knowledge sources. And finally, the last one here on the far right-hand side is Azure Machine Learning Service. This is a whole other service within Azure to build net new novel machine learning models. So Model Catalog is where you can deploy and consume existing large language and other generative AI models. Azure Machine Learning Services where you can deploy and train either new classical machine learning models or new generative AI machine learning models. All this is wrapped around tight compliance, tight governance, tight security, and managed by what we call the control plane within Foundry that gives you complete observability into what agents are doing, what are they accessing, who are they serving the information up with, and all that kind of stuff. So within the model catalog, kind of summarized this already, all sorts of diverse models and model providers directly within Azure. By the way, if you didn't know, this Claude is a big deal. We've had OpenAI in Azure for a long time. I think since late 2022 or early 2023, Azure OpenAI has been a service in Azure. But Claude recently, I think it was Ignite when we announced it. So back in November, we announced that Claude is now native to Azure. And it's also native to our Copilot stack too. So as you're using GitHub Copilot and Copilot Studio, and although there are thousands of Copilots we have now in Microsoft, Claude is an official, I think we call it Microsoft Online Services sub-processor, I think is the official term. So now you can use Claude within the Copilot stack and within Microsoft Foundry as if it were just a native Azure or Microsoft model. And then you have all these other models or model providers. And this says 11,000 plus. I think we're at like 11,500 now. So huge diversity of models. And the reason for that is because you kind of always want the most capable, most performant, cheapest model. Sometimes that's GPT 5.2 or Claude, Opus 4.5, I think we're at. Oftentimes they're the most capable and most performant, or probably not performant, they're kind of slow, but oftentimes they're most capable, but definitely not performant or cheap. So you want that diverse catalog of models to be able to, for your specific task, the cheapest, most capable performant model. And that's why you have so many of those available. And we give you tools within Foundry like benchmarking and things like that to be able to pick the right model for your task and the metrics you're trying to maximize. I briefly mentioned the agent service. So this is the service within Microsoft Foundry that you can use to create the agents, fully managed from a PaaS perspective, built on top of what we call the Microsoft Agent Framework. So we used to have a couple of different SDKs and frameworks for building agents within Microsoft land. Now we sort of settled on one. It's called the Agent Framework because we're not very creative with product names. And we put it in the Foundry Agent Service because, again, we're not very creative with product names unless it's called Copilot, right? And this is the platform that you can use to build those pro code agents, and it's built on top of OpenAI's. I think OpenAI was the first one to come out with the whole assistance API and responses API, that whole paradigm. I think back in 2023, it's built on top of that. We kind of copied their API through licensing terms we have with them because we kind of own a big chunk of OpenAI, and built on top of it, decouple things like storage, decouple things like encryption and how your data is processed, and give those permissions to you so you can have total control of where things are, how they're encrypted, how they're accessed. Do they have private networking, that kind of stuff? So total control, going to that spectrum of control versus convenience again. And added things like integration into Logic Apps, integration into all the Azure serverless tools, integration into MCP, integration onto the vast services and things we have available within Microsoft, like Fabric and SharePoint and Bing and AI search and all the 365 stuff. And I guess maybe the biggest value add, I would say, for the agent service in Microsoft Foundry versus using assistants within OpenAI or responses within OpenAI or the equivalent within Gemini or Claude or any other provider is we've also decoupled the model from this agent service, right? So you don't, if you use assistants or responses from Azure OpenAI or OpenAI directly, you're necessarily bound to OpenAI models. That's not true anymore in the agent service with Azure. We have, going back to that catalog, right? We have that vast catalog of approaching 12,000 models. A lot of those are able to be integrated natively within the agent service, which gives you the ability to use the best model, again, going the cheapest, fastest, most performant, or cheapest, most capable, most performance model for the right task, and as a platform, right? So fully compliant, fully managed, all that good stuff, but you take control of the code from the Microsoft Foundry perspective. That's what I had as an overview of the different services and when to use what for where and when. So I'm happy to answer questions. Hopefully this was informative. I know it's kind of rushed. Usually I spend a good chunk of a day going over this content with folks. So I'm happy to follow up with anybody on the call, or again, happy to answer things off the cuff here as well. I'll check the chat now too. So I see a question in the chat from Marge, going back to the model catalog, probably is where this came from. And by the way, hi, Marge. So, all right. All these models are running in Azure except for Claude today because it's currently in preview and we're building up the infrastructure right now to run it natively in Azure, which is going to be within the next couple months. So once Claude and Foundry is GA, then it'll be in Azure and will fall under DPA and HIPAA and all that other good stuff. While it's still in preview, obviously don't use it for production. That's not true for the Microsoft Online Services thing I mentioned earlier. That's all running natively within Microsoft and all copacetic with your DPAs and product terms and all that good stuff.
Question for you, Charles,
Yes.
because I see it in the chat. And I know that we do have some. Is this something that we can get a copy of slides to folks?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Happy to.
Okay, yeah. These just happen to have initially been branded as confidential, but I know that like often we have them confidential and then we just haven't removed those as we evolve. So they would love a copy of the slides. Yes, Andrew said yes.
Very enthusiastic.
Unless he was responding to Chris talking about aspirin, but I just wanted to make sure that we got that. And the video recording, don't worry, I got you on that one. Any other final questions? But yeah, Charles, you were correct. This is your second time because I went to go grab Charles's picture to put on our stuff. So when I loaded up and I was like, oh, there's another picture of Charles right there. So thank you, Charles, for being willing to come back to us again. Anything else that anybody's got before? Oh, I got good hair for you guys. Look at that. I do that. It's such a good look. This is where the slick stick comes in handy. Woo, there we go. All right. So if we don't have any other questions, just one final one. Happen to know if Microsoft is working on a front end for Foundry Local?
That's a good question. So for those of you who don't know, Foundry Local is the ability to deploy small language models onto locally, right at the edge, whether it's your workstation or server. I'm not sure if there's a front end. I'll have to look that up, Louis, and get back to you on that. I've deployed it on my workstation, but obviously that was all done through CLI and all that stuff. But yeah, good question. I'll follow up with you, Louis.
Perfect. Well, then I will go ahead and I will get the recording stopped. We will be back again next week, as I told folks on Tuesday.